Welcome to Native Bidaské, Native News Online's weekly spotlight on the people making news and leading change in Indian country. This episode is brought to you by Indian Land Capital Company.
Another episode of Native Bidaské. I'm Levi Rickert, founder, publisher, and editor of Native News Online. On Monday, January 29th, the world found out, we learned of the passing of N. Scott Momaday, who was a legendary Native American author. He passed away at the age of 89 in Santa Fe. He's credited for being the founding member of the Native American Renaissance. Momaday won a Pulitzer Prize for fiction in 1969 for his novel House of Dawn. In 2019, Momaday was the subject of a PBS American Masters film called Words from a Bear. That was produced and directed by filmmaker Jeffrey Palmer, who is also Kiowa, as was Scott Momaday. And Jeffrey teaches at Cornell University, teaches film. He's a filmmaker. We're honored to have you here with us today, Jeff. And good to have you on. And it's sad that your friend and our friend, I didn't know him, but I met him. But Scott Momaday, and I just as a journalist, I've always admired his working and his work. And I say, if I could write a sentence half as decent as his, I'd be happy. But yeah. He was such a tremendous writer. And yes. So welcome to Native Bidaské. And can you kind of, before we get going, share the genesis of that PBS film?
Yeah. I had a film that was in the Sundance Film Festival. It was a short film back in 2015 that was called Isabel's Garden, and it really sort of planted me on the scene, I think, in terms of being a filmmaker and also an indigenous filmmaker at that. So it was great to be there. And unbeknownst to me, behind the scenes, Shirley Sneevy, who was the director at that time of Vision Maker Media, and the executive producer of American Masters were having a meeting about having a Native biography profiled on American Masters, and it had been many years, probably a few decades, that they had somebody that was Native American that was profiled on American Masters. Wow. So it was a big deal, and Shirley made the statement that it should be in Scott Momaday, and after that, I think somehow, because I was there at the festival and they had seen the film, my name was thrown into the mix of somebody to work on this film. And, I was pretty green. I was pretty young in the business. And so jumping from making a short film to working on a feature film for, a national television series was a big leap. But I knew in my heart that this was really the film that was made for me. It was like, this is my opportunity to really do something that I knew I could do. And so I met with Scott in the early or late portion of 2015. I can't remember, or early 2016. And we began work on it.
So the process took what, 3.5 years?
About 3.5 years, I think. Once we got all the edits in and it premiered on television. So I include that, but it did premiere at Sundance in January of 2019, and what I remember about that is that Scott came to the screening, and it was the first time he had ever seen the film, all the way through from beginning to end. So of course, I'm there, as a director, and that's already scary enough. But having him there watching his own film it was really nerve-wracking, but we got a standing ovation, and I remember just how wonderful that moment was. And I remember him whispering to me that he thought I did a wonderful job with the film. And of course, we've talked years after that about it, and we became really good friends. And I just, you know, it was just the luck of the draw, I think, that it happened the way that it did. But it almost seemed as though it was meant to happen.
Yeah, that's fantastic to be part of something like that. And I think now that he's gone, I think we're going to realize how significant and historic he really was, even
Yeah.
of legendary proportions. So, hey, tell us, given you spent so much time, became friends, tell us about Scott Momaday, the man. Who was he?
Well, he tells you pretty much up front that he turns into a bear on occasion, and I've seen the bear come out of him, and he can be very quick-witted. He knows what he wants, and such a sharp mind for a person his age. But when you go back and you read everything and you hear him talk and you hear him speak, it's just, we're talking about somebody that just is, there's not many N. Scott Momadays around. We know of these people. They're few and far between, and the best way I can describe it is just that they're immensely talented, immensely brilliant, and one of a kind in some ways. And so it was always a pleasure to talk with him. And he also had this very, I think, Kiowa people, because we all know our families, we're all pretty close. I think he had a wonderful quality with me of treating me as one of his relatives, and one of his younger relatives at that. And so whether he was an uncle or whether he was a grandfather, in those moments, I always felt like we had that kind of bond and relationship. But in many ways, one of the things that I really think is that it was almost like a kindred spirit. We kind of grew up the same, and grew up in really only a few miles apart from each other, just in different time periods. So we shared a lot of stories and a lot of things that I think made our lives similar in some ways. And I think he was a really important aspect to why, I'm here at Cornell, to be able to work with somebody like that, and have that relationship. I learned a lot from him, and the fact that a Kiowa professor is at Cornell is not a small feat, and so I always have to think about that when I think about him, as how much he influenced my life.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that because I know you're going to be our guest, and the idea you do teach at Cornell is pretty significant. For a Kiowa man, a Native American, that is outstanding, and teach film. And tell us about N. Scott Momaday, the literary giant, because he was a giant.
Yeah.
How did he influence contemporary Native American writers?
Wow. I think by saying that he was, one of the founding fathers of the American Indian Renaissance, is the literary Renaissance, is correct. Whether that term is used these days or not, it really was a time period where there were writers and artists and folks coming, into what I would call the mainstream, whether it's media or any medium, really artistic medium. To win the Pulitzer Prize for literature is such a it's a wonderful thing. It's one of the highest prizes you can win, right?
Yes.
And it's a story about Native people, and it's a story about their struggle, and but also it was so rich in the way that it was written. But there's a great story that goes along with it, which is that at the time that he won the Pulitzer, he got a phone call from his editor, Fran, who called him up and said that you won the Pulitzer Prize for Literature, and he didn't believe her. He thought she was joking. And really, Harper and Row at the time didn't even know that book was in their lineup.
Wow.
Somehow they found out that somebody had submitted it. Apparently, it was there was a secretary that submitted the book, and by chance, it kind of made it through all of these different levels to the point where it became the winner. And it's just highly unusual when you think about it, to think that in 1969, this Kiowa man in this particular book, House Made of Dawn, which is a complex book about Native culture and identity, would be selected, for the Pulitzer. And you see some of the other books that it was up against, and it's kind of the who's who of literature. It was just a profound moment. And I think once that happened, it really influenced a generation that came after.
Yeah.
So the Joy Harjos of the world, the folks that came after James Welch, but even the generations that follow beyond that. And I think that for us as filmmakers and storytellers in general, we wouldn't be doing the things that we were doing if it wasn't for N. Scott Momaday. And I saw on Instagram, Sterling Harjo had posted something that a photo that he had taken with N. Scott Momaday, and wrote in there that he opened a lot of doors for all of us as storytellers, and it's really true. And as you said before, I don't know if we know the impact of that right at this moment, or maybe when he was alive, but we certainly will know the impact of that, coming now, as we really think and reflect about all the things that he was able to do.
Yeah, and as you were talking, to give it context of that time period, it was he won that prize just before Alcatraz takeover.
Yep.
Just before whereas the American Indian movement was formed in 1916, they really didn't come to prominence till maybe 1970. So he was a forerunner to this. And
yeah,
I know AIM kind of gets credit for the resurgence of Indian culture and that type of thing, but I think appropriately so. You have to put N. Scott Momaday right there, and I really appreciate you bringing that out.
Yeah, he really was a change maker, I think, and again, those are few and far between. And
sure.
But I think he did it in a different way than maybe Russell Means might have done it, right? He always talked about the fact that he tended to stay away from the political and focused more on the beauty of being an earth keeper, and I think that is an important and profound difference. But both of them, I think, had the same idea in terms of revitalizing and bringing these stories, into the public's eye, whether they were political stories or whether they were, these stories that were, about origin or about the beauty of our cultures. So he was there with that. And then he went to Alcatraz and he did those things. So as much as he always says to me that I'm not political, I'm like, Scott, the history says, actually,
we have pictures.
yeah, you were highly involved in politics at that time. So,
yeah.
As many Native people were at that time. So,
yeah. And as far as his influence, is he still relevant? It seems to me there's a new generation. I was talking to somebody in my office. She happens to be an attorney, and after I found out he passed away, And she said, I didn't even know who he is. And I'm like, what? How can you not know who
Yeah.
Scott Momaday is? And,
Yeah.
nothing against her, but my point is, what is his relevancy today, and maybe to our viewers, and if you have children or if you're young watching this, you need to pick up in Scott Momaday's book. I actually picked up this one.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, and I'm gonna, in his honor, I'm gonna read it this week. I already started it. You know what I really get out of him was he took this transition from oral storytelling and put it in written word in such a profound way that you would almost think that those words, you could almost hear him saying it because he had such a deep voice and a really authoritative voice. So, and let me ask you this, Jeff, in your teaching at Cornell, are you able to talk about the oral history of Native Americans and how it relates to both print and then even into film? You teach film.
Oh yeah. Always. It's always a part of my pedagogy to talk about storytelling and ancestry and where we come from, our connections to place.
Yes.
Those types of things that are very indigenous that I think I can get across to many different cultures, right? And I think Momaday was what he was really great at. His mentors, like Ivor Winters, were not they weren't Native people, and a lot of the folks that he studied, in the time that he was at Stanford, he liked a lot of non-Native writers, and sort of developed his aesthetic off of that. But it was the transfer of that sort of knowledge that he got in those writing classes and reading those books and sort of creating this new aesthetic using Kiowa stories that just was different than anything else, and nobody had ever quite done that in that way. And so I think it was a melding of different types of things that he learned. And the thing that I guess is important to say is that what he does is he really gives you an opportunity to say, like, wow, this is the possibilities for us. There's so much more that we can do. And I think for young people who don't know N. Scott Momaday, and I would say that there's probably a lot of young folks, in this generation that haven't picked up House Made of Dawn or Way to Rainy Mountain, is to pick the book up and read it and really realize how it extends you into, another place and another time, and in such an eloquent way. And at the same time is really just these Kiowa origin stories, So he elevates them in the literature that he writes, in the poetry that he writes. And as you were saying earlier, it's like, wow, he's a great writer. That's all of that training and all of that research and all of those things that he does. It's all mixed in there. So I always say he's a great American writer. I don't, yes, it's obvious he's a great Native American writer, but he's up there with the best. He's up there with all of the greats. And whether it's poetry, he's up there with Whitman, or whether it's a novel like, a Faulkner novel, House Made of Dawn can stand up to The Sound and the Fury. And that's who he is. He's up there in the echelon, I think, of literature.
Yeah, that's great. And you haven't worked with him for so closely on the film. I just think it's remarkable. I mean, you must. I'm gonna use a word. It sounds almost, but you have precious memories, I'm sure. So there's no two ways about it. Hey, they're in the film. I took note, and I was looking at the trailer overnight. Jeff Bridges, Bo Bridges are in the film.
Yes.
Tell me the connection to the Bridges brothers.
Yeah. So, we found out, a lot of the luminaries that are in the film, were given to us by Scott. And so
Oh, nice.
he brought up Jeff and Bo, very early when we were doing the pre-production for the film. And so we knew we were going to meet with them, and they were elated by the fact that we were making the movie and wanted to instantly be a part of it.
Yeah,
And
that's so nice.
and so the story is that Bo Bridges was writing a story about Carlisle Indian School. He was really interested in Pratt, and wanted to kind of, I think, look at it through the lens of that man. And maybe even his brother would play that part. I could see Jeff Bridges being a great Pratt. And so in the midst of doing this, he realized he had to have native voices in it, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't, he didn't feel comfortable with writing native voices, which is unusual in Hollywood.
Yeah, so he actually he realized he couldn't capture that voice.
Right.
So he reached out. Yes, that's good.
There's a lot of those guys that think they can, but he realized he couldn't. And his brother made sure that he knew that, and that's kind of part of the movie funny part of the movie is that Jeff just basically told him, like, what tribe are you from? And so, so they decided to hire in Scott Momaday. Momaday just, he was an artist. And so he was always around luminaries and movie stars and people, they respected his work. And I think Jeff Bridges had recently met up with him for something. And so they asked him to write the script for this film. And it's called A Room with Two Moons.
Wow.
And A Window with Two Moons. Yeah. And it's about the story of Carlisle. And the opening scene is with Jim Thorpe and Carlisle playing Army on the football field. And
oh my goodness.
And so we go through this whole thing in the movie of him describing this, but it's powerful because it's in Scott Momaday's words and the way that he was thinking about this. But when I went to the Beinecke at Yale to do research on the film, I found all of his script notes and all of these different things. And wow, he spent a large amount of time at Dickinson College and down there in Pennsylvania and working with people to really understand, that situation. And I think that he may have wanted to write a book, even about it. He never did. I think it saddened him, but the script was made, and I think it had some interest at the time, but it lost steam like a lot of scripts do. And Bo Bridges, I think, still wants to make it,
Well, the timing may be right.
The timing might be right.
High interest in Indian boarding schools during the last 2 years. So yes,
I need to call him up, and
really give him, nudge him. And in the film, you had Joy Harjo, of course, Robert Redford, James Earl Jones, and man, so he in Scott Momaday brought those people to you, so to speak.
Yeah, that's who he wanted, and there were more than that. There were many more than that, and we couldn't get them all in. Jane Fonda, and, I mean, it's just an incredible list. And these folks were the closest to him, I think, and we felt like it gave the best representation from sort of these different angles. And but yeah, we called them all, and of course all of them were just like, yeah, we want to be in the film. It was easier than what it is for most people, I think.
So how will viewers be able to see the film? I mean, I remember watching it in the confines of my home when it was on PBS, and it was so powerful. There was a couple times as in Scott Momaday was talking, and that voice of his, it got to me. I had tears in my eyes. It was powerful. It was a powerful film. But when did people see it?
So what I found out today is that PBS is working on an in memoriam broadcast of the film. I don't know the exact date and time yet for that, but check your local PBS stations and affiliates, and it should, you can get information that way. Also, you can go to the American Masters website. At the American Masters website, you'll get information on that broadcast, but you'll also be able to get a way to, they have a streaming service through PBS. That's one way that you can watch it. Another way you can watch it is Amazon Prime. It has it. I think Apple TV has it. A lot of streaming services, but I know Amazon Prime for sure is pretty cheap for a rental. I think it's $4.99, $5.99 for a one-time rental of it.
Yeah, it's worth
it.
Yeah.
So,
well, Jeff, thank you so much, Chimigwichi, for coming on Native Bidaské. Talk about your good friend in Scott Momaday, and I know it has to be hard on you, and just the newness of his passing is there, and it's hard. And but listen, I hope to have you back on Native Bidaské in the future. Anything you can talk about what you're working on as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I finished a film called Ghosts. It's a short film which happens to be about boarding schools. It's about three Kiowa boys who escape a boarding school in Anadarko, Oklahoma, back in the 1800s, and it stars Lane Factor, who plays Cheese on Reservation Dogs. And I think it's a wonderful film. It's been on the festival circuit for a little over a year now and has done quite well. There's a chance that it might be on PBS coming soon, so just kind of look out for that, or you might be able to find me posting things about it, on Facebook or Instagram. And then I'm also working on the Barack Obama Presidential Center, which is in the south side of Chicago. It's part of my professional work that I do as a documentary filmmaker, and I've been working on that for about 3 years now, and working in a museum and making films that are about a president is an interesting experience. So so those are kind of the things that I'm doing.
I'm so happy to hear that this Kiowa man, this filmmaker, is having such great success. That is wonderful. And
thank you.
I said, we'll have you back on Native Bidaské, and thank you very much for coming on and share. And to our viewers, we were talking to Jeffrey Palmer, who's a film professor at Cornell University, talking about his friend in Scott Momaday. And we will be back next week with another episode of Native Bidaské. In the meantime, take care of your grandma, your grandpas, give them hugs, and show a lot of love. And Chimigwich for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Aho.
What ruse of vision, escarping the wall of leaves, rending incision into countless surfaces, would cull and color his somnolence, whose old age has outworn valor, all but the fact of courage. Seen, he does not come, move, but seems forever there, dimensionless, dumb in the windless noon's hot glen. More scarred than others, these years since the trap maimed him, pain slants his withers, drawing up the crooked limb. Then he is gone, whole, without urgency from sight. As buzzards control imperceptibly their flight.
If you appreciate what we do here at Native News Online, we invite you to donate to support our continued work covering Indian country. You can scan this code with your smartphone or go to the link located below this video to donate today. We greatly appreciate your support. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And be sure to scan this code or go to the link below to subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you for joining us today, and please be sure to join us again next week for another episode of Native Bidaské. Chimi Gwech.